On this episode of Locked On Angels, it's FANMAIL Friday, and you asked about what will happen to Kevin Pillar when Mike Trout comes back. Plus, we're going to recap last night's game against the Diamondbacks. It's time to get locked on with Mike and John, and this is Locked On Angels.
You are Locked On Angels, your daily Los Angeles Angels podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. You can find us anywhere you get your podcast, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and SiriusXM by searching Locked On Angels. And if you'd like to give back to the Super Halo Bros for all the Super Halo content, here's some things that you can do. Leave us a rate and a review on Apple Podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button. And if you're not subscribed already, please subscribe and become a Locked On Everydayer. And whether you're watching or listening, come over to YouTube, leave a comment. It's one of the best ways to get in touch with John and I and be a part of the conversation. And today's show is brought to you by our Everydayers at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase.
Happy Friday to you, and thank you for being here for this episode of Locked On Angels, where it's your team every day. You've got the Frisch Brothers here with you, a.k.a. the Super Halo Bros. My name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
Mike, it's our third season here at Locked On Angels. We're talking Angels baseball Monday through Friday, the best place, the number one Angels podcast where you can do that every single weekday. We appreciate all of our everydayers helping us be number one and enjoying that. Hey, on today's show, we're going to Mike's going to recap that final game against the Diamondbacks in our third segment. But before we get to that, we've got to prioritize your questions. I do want to shout out the fact that it's June 14th. Happy Keith Hernandez Day if you're a Seinfeld fan. He was not the spitter. There was a second spitter, right, Mike?
Love that.
Hey, listen, we wanted to get into this real fast because we feel like it's really important. And we wanted to take a moment to remember Steve Klauke. He was the voice of the Salt Lake Bees for 29 years, Mike, the
Wow.
Angels AAA affiliate. He retired last year after calling 4,181 games. He tragically passed away on Monday at the age of 69. So many kind words were among the baseball community about Steve. And so I just wanted to take a moment to share some of those on our show, because not only did our everydayers share some kind words, but we also heard from former hosts and, you know, of course, people that we are involved in the Angels, like Mark Gubiza and Victor Rojas. So I just wanted to take time to, remember Steve and take the time to share some of the kind words. In fact, Steve Granado, former host of Locked On Angels and a minor league broadcaster in his own right, he said, "Shockingly terrible news. Klauke was the absolute best. Not only a great and entertaining broadcaster, but treated me with 100% respect. Thinking of him and his family today." Brent McGuire, also former host of Locked On Angels and an MLB.com writer, said, "This is terrible news. Steve was one of the best in the business." And then Mike, Taylor Blake Ward, we always say Angels, Locked On Angels Hall of Famer. He, of course, is a baseball writer and former Locked On Angels host. He said it crushed. Steve was truly the best and was incomparable. No one loved baseball quite like Steve. Prayers to Sue, Lisa, and Adam.
Victor Rojas also tweeted, "This is just awful news. You would be hard-pressed to find anyone who loved life as much as Steve, always with a smile on his face and never had a bad thing to say about anyone. Such a great, great man and broadcaster. He will certainly be missed dearly." And of course, Gooby tweeted that it was such a sad day. Steve was an amazing broadcaster, but an even better person, sending prayers to his entire family. R.I.P. Steve. And you mentioned, Johnny, there were some everydayers who shared their thoughts on Steve and what he meant. Leroy SLC tweeted that a Salt Lake City baseball icon. He'll certainly be missed. Rest in peace. And then Chris Cook, favorite friend of ours and everydayer here on Locked On Angels, he said, growing up in Salt Lake City, we would love to turn on the radio and listen to Steve call Buzz, Stingers, and B games. Such sad news to hear of his passing. Always well prepared each and every game.
Yeah, Steve was kind enough to come on Locked On Angels back when Steve Granado was hosting. I believe he also had a moment where he came on to talk with Brent as well, because he would fill those guys in on what's going on at AAA, and he would have just great insight into the AAA players, Mike, that the Angel fans want to know about. He retired last year, so we didn't get a chance to have him on our version of the show, but just from all accounts, all the great words about Steve Klauke, such a tragedy. But of course, we give our best to his family. They'll definitely be in our prayers. So thank you guys for letting us take a moment just to remember Steve, because yes, he was an important person in the Angels organization and just gave his baseball wisdom to everyone, including everydayers who have come across our show in the past.
Yeah, not just a play-by-play guy, but a fan of the Angels, of course, a fan of the Bees. And you could tell when he did his play-by-play calling, he was so good at what he did. And so we really appreciate all the work that he put in. Again, prayers to him and for his family specifically. Now, it is Fan Mail Friday, and so we wanted to get to some of your questions and respond with some of our thoughts. So JJ Mailman, you're up first on YouTube. He commented, what happens to Pilar when Trout comes back? Do they DFA him? He thinks that's out of the question. I think a lot of that. Keep him and send Moniak down. Do you start using Ward and Moniak as trade bait, or is it time for Trout to start training at first base? Johnny, what do you think?
Well, first off, Mickey Moniak is out of options. So if he got sent down, the Angels would risk exposing him to waivers, something they probably don't want to do. They don't want Mickey Moniak to be claimed, and then the Angels have to make a trade, that sort of thing. So I think sending Mickey Moniak down is probably not an option because he is out of options.
Yeah.
Seems like, Mike, if I were to guess, Willie Calhoun would be the first one to go as an outfielder, unless they keep his left-handed bat, which has been helpful in this lineup. He did sign a minor league deal, while Kevin Pillar's was a major league deal. So if Calhoun gets sent down, he would have to be DFA'd and pass through waivers, and that's because he is also out of options. However, he would be exposed to waivers. Another team could make a claim. They would make a trade, that sort of thing. I feel like there's a good chance Willie might stick in the organization. I'm not sure that he would get claimed immediately. The more likely candidate, Mike, would honestly be Cole Tucker, because they have a lot of infield options now between Rengifo and Guillorme and Stefanik being back, that sort of thing. He'll likely be gone once Drury comes back, so that might be a definite thing that happens. However, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to go in that order, right? Just because an outfielder is coming back doesn't mean you need to get rid of another outfielder. I think Cole Tucker would probably be the first person to go. Now, the Angels are listening on Taylor Ward. We've heard the asking price is pretty significant, which is good. Stand up for yourselves, Angels.
Yeah.
It also depends on if there's any trade interest in Kevin Pillar, which he's having maybe the best season of his career, Mike.
Right.
And so the Angels really lucked out in having him perform like this. We should also consider that Trout could be DHing as he comes back from this injury. So just to address JJ's question again, I don't think we have to worry about Pillar going anywhere until the trade deadline at the end of the day. Mike, Sydney Scott Author on YouTube wants to know odds that the Angels keep Pillar around for more than this season. What do you say?
I say the odds are low, and here's why. We fell in love with Moustakas last year. Everybody wanted Mike Moustakas to come back. You'll notice that Mike Moustakas isn't really doing anything right now, and that's why he didn't come back. He was really good when we needed him, and I think Kevin Pillar might fit into that category. I don't necessarily think we're going to see him next year, especially with this Angels perspective and seeming like kind of a rudderless system. Pillar was just somebody that they brought in to fill in. I think that if they were smart, if they were wise, they would continue to run with some of the younger guys and continue to run with giving them opportunity. And I think Kevin Pillar, if they do bring him back, he'll be a bench piece. I think right now he's just seeing the ball and hitting the ball really well. I would be interested in watching where he's at August, September, and seeing what happens with his stats. This run is fantastic, and I'm grateful for it. He certainly has filled in nicely for Mike Trout. But I would say that the odds are very, very low in having Pillar come back to this team next season.
Yeah, the fact is the Angels have lucked out with the fact that they needed a fill-in piece when Mike Trout got hurt. And so they go and get Kevin Pillar for $2 million, right?
Yeah.
And now he's just tearing it up out there. And this is the perfect guy to trade sometime between now and the trade deadline, because there's a lot of teams out there who are going to want that bat in their lineup as they make a playoff push. So to me, I think now is the time to trade Pilar.
And he's somebody that is going to be a veteran that's going to bring a whole lot of great wisdom and experience. And he has already proven, at least in the time with the Angels, that he can sit on the bench for a game or two and then still come in and produce. And he can pinch hit, and he can also produce when he pinch hits. And so he's playing good defense out there. I know we joked about it, but I think that there is some truth in the joke. When Taylor Ward was overthrowing or throwing to the wrong base, you had commented, I think it was two games ago, and Kevin Pilar threw the ball to second base to show the outfield how and why you throw, where you throw. And so he's somebody that I think you can just count on. I could see him slotting into a playoff team, Yankees, Dodgers, some of those teams.
Braves, he could go back to the Braves. He's a former Brave.
And they really need some help there. And so I could see him slotting in. And I would even go out on a limb and say he gets on a playoff team because we've traded him. I would go out on a limb and say, watch out in one of those games in the playoffs. Kevin Pilar is going to go 3 for 5, with 2 home runs and 4 RBIs, right? He's going to just be somebody that's a menace, and probably in one of the division series, be somebody that if they could vote for MVP in those series, he would be the guy that they would give it to, because he is that type of player right now. And perhaps we can get something for him. And we picked him up just off of the waiver wire, right? And so this is a great deal for the Angels. I think they need to be smart about what they do with Kevin Pilar.
You brought up his experience and the way that he can help educate these young outfielders. Mike, I think that's why a lot of people are asking this question, because certainly Sidney Scott Author is not the first one to ask about Kevin Pilar coming back. At the same time, I think it really depends on who do they trade out of this outfield come this trade deadline. Again, Taylor Ward is on the table. What's the team look like next season? Because, perhaps there is an opportunity to add a veteran bat back to this lineup. Just it really is kind of funny because who am I thinking of? Aaron Hicks started out the year as that veteran outfielder, and he's everything that we've. I should say, Pilar has been everything that they wanted to get out of Aaron Hicks. But you know what? This year, it's Kevin Pilar. Last year, it was Aaron Hicks with the Orioles, and this year, it's Kevin Pilar with the Angels. And so I'm sure there's an opportunity to bring him back next season. Like you said, I think we need to see how the rest of this season goes for Kevin Pilar. Hey, thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen today. The Angels are playing the Giants on the road at 7:15 Pacific time tonight. You can catch every pitch of the Angels hometown broadcast on SiriusXM with the SXM app. Just search Angels. Coming up on Locked On Angels, can the Angels win with Arte Moreno as the owner? Oh, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? We're going to get into that coming right up.
Hey, listen, just because tax season is over for many of us doesn't mean that the IRS is going to stop coming after you for those unfiled taxes, right? And so you need some help, and that's why you should check out Tax Network USA. The IRS can garnish your wages, they can levy your bank account, they can even seize your property, and you don't want them to target you. You can get licensed professionals and tax experts, Johnny, with Tax Network USA.
Are you saying they can do that any time of year, not just April? Is that what you're saying?
Any time of year.
Oh boy, and I better give them a call.
I love these guys because they helped me with a tax issue earlier this year. They've got over 14 years of experience and an A+ rating by the Better Business Bureau. Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion in tax debt. That sounds fantastic, right? So whether you owe taxes or you have complicated matters like I do that require some tax planning, or maybe you just hit that parlay this season and you're like, what do I do with this money? How do I file this money? Don't want to put it under the couch cushions, although you might be tempted to do that, right? So this is why Tax Network USA is somebody that you need on your team. So here's how you can get a hold of them. First, you can call 1-800-549-1000. That's 1-800-549-1000. John's calling right now. Or you can visit tnusa.com/lockedon. You can also see the link in this episode description below.
This is the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and everydayers, if you haven't done so, make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program just for you to bring you the biggest stories across the sports world every single day. It's can't miss analysis, opinions, news, all the stuff you're looking for from hosts who know what they're talking about.
Yep.
They aren't just speculating wildly like sometimes they do on cable television. So go to YouTube. It's streaming 24/7 there, and the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, so you watch it on your TV as well. So it's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. And speaking of your team, the Angels are back at it tonight against the San Francisco Giants. They're on the road, 7:15 Pacific time. Mike, man, I haven't been to that stadium before. I would love to go to that field and catch Angels Giants. I wish I was up there this weekend. You can catch every pitch of the Angels hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search Angels.
It is FanMail Friday, and we're going to wrestle with this question. Can the Angels win with Arte? So we got a question off of YouTube that said, can we expect a winning team in the next 5 years with Arte Moreno as the owner? Johnny, what do you think?
Yeah, me Viejo DIM on YouTube sent in that question. To me, deep breath. To me, there's two ways to answer this, Mike. Yes, they could potentially have a winning record, if that's your definition of a winning team. Can they get to the playoffs? That, to me, is a little bit more questionable. Can they be a winning team? Back to that winning record. On one hand, you can see the young players continuing to get better. Rendon comes off the books after 2026, and so that frees up more money.
Yep.
The young bullpen arms in AA start to come up at this point, so you're not spending money on relief pitching because you have that in-house. You've got young talent in-house. This puts them in a good position to add some pieces and count on that minor league talent in addition to what they already have. Now, the big question here is the rotation. Arte has historically refused to spend money on starting pitching. The last guy he spent money on was Tyler Anderson on a very good deal of $13 million a year, by the way. Before that, it was Joe Blanton, Mike, who got more than 1 year as a starter.
Yeah.
CJ Wilson was really the last good starter that the Angels ponied up the money for. And that was, let me check here, 13 years ago, Mike. So when it comes to ace quality starters, that's where they've dropped the ball in the past. So yes, I think they have a good chance of getting a winning record despite Arte. The young core plus bullpen arms from the minor leagues. You continue to see Zach Neto get better, Joe Adell get better. Those guys, I think, are going to really help improve this team moving forward. However, what's going to put them over the edge is honestly how they spend in free agency. Are they going to get a frontline starter? Will they add a free agent bat that makes a difference? I mean, there's already jokes about, well, Arte likes his superstars. Is he going to be in the running for Juan Soto? Look, I'm not going to say no to Juan Soto, but we all know that the outfield bat is not the biggest area of need on this team. Is he going to improve that lineup? Oh, 200%. Absolutely. I will dance up and down if they sign Juan Soto, especially at his age too, Mike. He's early mid-20s. But the thing is, I'm interested to see which players over the next 5 years come up through the minor league system. We already talked about like JJ Weatherholt yesterday. That was going to be their possible 8th pick, according to Taylor Blake Ward. We'll see how they draft in this one. And we'll see what the trade pieces that they give away at this deadline do and see what they get back in return. So all of these things are TBD at the moment. At the moment, we've got TBW, Taylor Blake Ward, and TBD. And so I say, yes, they can have a winning team in the next 5 years, even despite Arte. But a playoff team, I think, is a different story, and you're going to need Arte to pony up, so to speak. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think that he has proven in the past that this team can be very good and make the playoffs and do well in the playoffs as the owner of this team. But that is late 2000s, and he had good baseball people around him, and he didn't have John Carpino, whose job was it to come in and to make this a successful business for him. And
business.
If that's his priority, it could be a struggle. I think the Angels will fall backwards into a couple of winning seasons, but to actually be a team that's going to be competitive in the playoffs, I think you're right. There's a lot of thought and strategy that the Angels don't seem to have at the moment that they're going to need if that's going to happen.
Absolutely. Hey, Mike, Angels Ducks fan 1969 on YouTube said, here's 2 questions for you. Do you guys know if Sonny DiChiara was sent down to Lake Elsinore for rehab? I hear Mike Trout rumors are starting again. How true are those? Thanks. Love your guys' show. Thank you. Angels Ducks fan 1969 on YouTube.
Love that.
Sonny DeShera started out the year at AAA, Mike, after playing with the Trash Pandas the last couple years, but he struggled there. He hit 115, a 217 on base, a 154 slugging, and a 371 OPS. Obviously, something was going on there. He was moved to single A and is currently hitting 205, 347 on base, 346 slugging, a 694 OPS. Just recently, he came back on Wednesday night and went 1 for 3 with a stolen base. So how about that? He doesn't seem like he's adjusted well to professional baseball, because after a huge year at Auburn in 2022, he was drafted that year. He's taken a step back. Listen to his last season at Auburn in 2022, 22 home runs, 59 RBIs, 68 walks in 61 games.
Wow.
He hit a 384 average, 549 on base, 777 slugging, and a 1.326 OPS. Obviously, it's college ball, so yeah, those numbers can be inflated. But in his entire minor league career across 152 games since he got drafted that year, 11 home runs, 58 RBIs, 83 walks, a 204 average, 328 on base, 308 slugging, and a 636 OPS. So Sonny D, it's interesting that they sent him to single A. Maybe they rushed his development a little too soon. I know injuries have bit him as well. So it'll be interesting to see what happens to him for the remainder of the season down in single A. Mike, why don't you give us some news on Mike Trout?
Yeah, we got a tweet from Jeff Fletcher on Wednesday. He said that Trout, who is 5 weeks removed from his surgery to repair the torn meniscus, is still working out in the gym and running on an Alter G, which is an anti-gravity treadmill.
They bought one, Mike.
I want to run on that. It took them. It took them 20 years.
Yeah, remember Pujols wanted one. They said no, and so they bought one.
Yay! He hasn't begun to run with his full weight on his leg. And so 4 to 6 weeks is what the narrative was for the surgery that Trout has had. But 4 to 6 weeks really is like the recovery from the surgery, not getting back to baseball activities. And so I think, Johnny, we got to be really, really patient with Mike. And I think that he's probably not going to be around until after the All-Star break, simply because there's a lot of work that he needs to do after feeling better in his knee. And we saw last year, he came back way too soon with a hamate injury and wasn't able to swing the bat and then was gone. And so I don't think that they're going to rush him back. And quite honestly, there doesn't seem to be a need to rush him back unless and now I'm speaking like 80,000 feet here, unless they're trying to incentivize a trade to another team with Mike Trout. But I can't see them even wanting to consider that. And I don't know if they'll even have conversations about that. At least Perry might, Arte will not. And I just don't see why you would even want to rush this guy back again, because he's very fragile, right? And it wouldn't be smart to put him back. And it's not like he is the game changer for this team. He does impact this team. I get it. But putting him back into this lineup doesn't necessarily mean that they're all of a sudden a contending team or even a 500 team, right? And so having him in this lineup would be great. Having him in the outfield would be great. Maybe even at DH would be great. But there doesn't seem to be an incentive to rush him back because they're not really playing for anything right now. Yeah,
it would be unwise to get him back as soon as possible, especially considering he had the short-term version of the knee surgery, Mike. So that's a little concerning as well. Hey, Sega7770 on YouTube said, what are the odds of us making the playoffs, as the schedule is probably one of the easiest the rest of the way through? Well, unfortunately, it's very small, according to FanGraphs projections. It's 0.7% of making the playoffs, 0.3% of winning the division, and 0.4% of clinching a wild card spot. Now, for reference, the Mariners...
You're telling me there's a chance.
Now, for reference, the Mariners are in first place currently with a 40-30 record as of the recording. They have an 82.6% chance of making the playoffs. But projections, I don't pay much attention to them because they're fluid. They change on a dime, but they do factor in the strength of schedule, Mike, which is an important part of playoff projections. And teams who are already in the mix and have good high percentages of making the playoffs, there's a couple of them that also have easy schedules the rest of the way. The Royals have the 5th easiest the rest of the way. The Twins have the 8th easiest. The Orioles have the 12th easiest, and the Yankees have the 15th easiest. And for reference, The Angels have the 7th easiest the rest of the way. So they have a lot of catching up to do with other teams who also have easy schedules. Look, we are excited for the remainder of the schedule, but they also have their share of tough teams. They got the Brewers and the Dodgers this month, the Rangers and the Mariners next month, the Yankees, Braves, Royals, and Mariners in August. Listen to this. Dodgers, Twins in September, but also in September, the Astros twice and the Rangers twice. So
wow.
They are getting more easier teams like the A's, the Rockies, the White Sox along the way. They still got to show up for those games too, Mike. And we all know that they tend to be bitten by teams that they should beat, but don't always. That's not always the case, if you know what I'm saying. If you're a longtime Angel fan, you know that there's a lot of teams they should beat, but that doesn't always necessarily happen.
Everydayers, if you're getting tickets for concerts, comedy, theater, or perhaps even sports, you're going to go to an Angel game, you need Game Time. They are now the authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. It makes ticket getting so much easier and faster. You can save money with Game Time. They have in-app exclusive flash deals on seats for the game or whatever event you're going to. They have zone deals that will save you even more money when you choose the section and Game Time chooses the seat. And then they have all-in pricing. It's a feature that shows the total right up front. There's no surprises at checkout. You also get a panoramic view of where your seat will be, so you get an idea of what it is and where it is and how you're going to be looking at things, which is great. Thank you for that show on YouTube, Johnny. I appreciate that. And it's also the lowest price guarantee with Game Time. They're going to give you 110% of the difference if you find tickets in the same section and for the same price, and it's less. They're going to hook you up. I love Game Time so much. Every time we go to games, we use Game Time. Plus, your tickets are covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of Game Time, out of buying tickets, and use Game Time. Download the Game Time app right now. Use our promo code LOCKEDONMLB. They're going to give you $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONMLB, $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Well, I wish I had really good news for you, but I don't. That game last night was not a fun one to watch. 11-1, the Diamondbacks got a victory over the Halos, and it was one of those games. Griffin Canning had the start. It was one of those games that you knew was going to be tough, and it was one of those typical Griffin Canning games because he gave up 3 runs in the first inning, and then he kind of looked good and settled down the rest of the game. Went 6 innings, gave up 4 runs, 4 hits, and the Angels weren't out of this game until the bottom of the 7th inning, and they gave up 6 runs. That bullpen kind of fell apart. Luis Garcia and Hunter Strickland just could not get anybody out, and that was really frustrating. And we could blame them. We could get upset with them, but the reality was the Angels offense really couldn't do anything in this game. They couldn't really get any runners to score, and so Angels again lose this one 11-1. And isn't it ironic that we just talked about the Angels schedule being the 7th easiest for the rest of the way? Listen, Angels, it's easy. And so stop making it really difficult on yourself and go out and play the game that we all know that you can play, because the night before they looked fantastic. I'm going to pick on Taylor Ward again because he's just somebody that I can pick on, right? And he gets really frustrating for me, especially on the offensive side. No hits in this game. His batting average has dipped down to, I think he's at 250 right now, struck out twice in the game. And somebody that the Angels rely upon when it comes to the offense, and he just hasn't been able to do anything. And it seems like he hits those home runs at random times, and so his stats will look good at the end of the year. But quite honestly, he hasn't really been making an impact for us. And so I think the Angels, the sooner they can trade him and get some good value, I think the better it will be for them. If we're going to talk a little bit about some of the highlights, I'm going to highlight Mickey Moniak. He did change his swing, and now he does have a 5-game hitting streak. And wouldn't it be great to see Moniak actually get going? That would be fantastic. And I know Joe Adell has really been struggling as well. His batting average is 194, but his defense, ironically, has really been good. He had a great diving catch last night. He's got 6 defensive run saves entering this game last night in right field, tied with Kyle Tucker of the Houston Astros. And so that was great to see. And I did mention Griffin Canning, 6 innings, 4 hits, 4 runs. He had 4 earned runs, 1 walk, 3 Ks, and 2 home runs. It really seems to be the home run ball that is doing him in. But I think that this is who he is, right? He's the 6th inning guy. He's going to give up a couple of runs, couple of hits. He's 2-7 on the season. He threw 97 pitches last night. 59 of them were strikes. So the Angels do lose this game. It was a frustrating game to watch. And again, trailing just 4-1 and then watching everything fall apart in that 7th inning. And it feels like the Angels, and I know there are other teams that do this, but man, doesn't it feel like the Angels just find a way to flush everything down the toilet when it comes to being in a close game and then bringing in some bullpen pieces. So hopefully we can rebound and get a win tonight against the Giants. Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. The Angels do play the Giants at 7:15. They're on the road in San Francisco, and you can catch every pitch of the Angels' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search Angels, and you can follow John and I on the Super Halo Bros. You can find us on Twitter, Super Halo Bros, and also on Twitter, Locked On Angels. And then we are on Instagram, Super Halo Bros. And so please give us a follow. We would love to hear from you, hear your comments, hear your suggestions, hear your thoughts. Maybe there's some highlights that you want to focus on from last night. I know it was hard to find, but maybe there's some good things that you want to look at and potentially what the future might hold if they can trade away some of these pieces to get some younger guys. So follow us on social media. We would love to hear from you. Coming up on Monday on Locked On Angels, we're going to recap the weekend series against the Giants. All 3 of those games we'll talk about on Monday. So we hope that you'll join us. On behalf of my brother John, my name is Mike. Thanks for joining us here on Locked On Angels. Great to be with you, and we'll see you again on Monday. And I'm talking right now just because Torrid waits until the end. He's an everydayer, waits until the end to hear from us. So hi, Torrid.